Hi, I'm Olivia Dunkley. I am the writer, producer, director, and one of the actors of Sleigh Ride. Sleigh Ride, the movie, is a holiday horror film about a serial killer, Santa Claus, who is out killing 12 victims for the 12 days of Christmas. Hollywoods is the last name on his naughty list. Hollywoods, however, is putting up a fight. She's not putting up a great fight, but she is fighting for her life and for the life of her husband and her son. And Kris Connors, the Kris Kringle Killer, has them all as characters in his little mind play. Sleigh Ride came about because Bob Scott and I were at lunch one day. Actually, I call him Bob Scott. Robert Griffith, aka Scott Rhodes. Robert Griffith was his real name. Scott Rhodes was his pseudonym and or his stage name. Anyway, we were at lunch and I was telling him an experience that I'd had with my distributor for my first film, A Holiday Boyfriend, and I'd somehow given my distributor the impression that I was doing a holiday horror film, and he was like, "You have a holiday horror?" And I was like, no, I don't do horror. And he was like, "Okay, well, if you ever have one, we'd be really interested." And I told Bob this story, and he said, "Well, I have an idea for a short holiday horror film." And I was like, "Okay." And he proceeded to tell me in the next 30 seconds this little outline for this short film. And I was like, "Oh, I love that." I said, "We're going to make that movie." And he goes, "Well, it's just a short film." And I said, "Not when I get done with it." Shooting in Utah was a whole new experience for me because I shot my first film here in LA. So I had crew and cast options and locations and all these things, but Utah was where the snow was. I wanted it to be a Christmas movie with snow. So I struggled to find any crew. I had to Google and search and finally found a site where all these professionals post themselves as available for hire. You know, you can find your grips and your cameramen and your all of your crew basically. And so I started watching reels for DPs. I wanted to hire my DP first, and I found Eric Pasternak, and through Eric I hired the rest of the crew. He knew where to send me for sound, and then Robert Andrews, he had the equipment that I needed to rent as well as the sound, and we found all of our players, second camera and everything. And then during the course of the film we lost all our players. We had COVID hit the set and people walked, and anyway, it was, my crew totally stepped up. They instantly were like, "I know somebody," and they called, and I never had a single delay in a shoot day. Every time I needed somebody, my crew was able to fill the spot with somebody that they knew, and we were able to shoot every day that we had scheduled to shoot for Sleigh Ride. But it was interesting. On top of being unable to hire crew, I had no idea how to hire cast. Out here in LA, it's so easy. There's all these avenues, and you know where to post, and you know how to get people in, and you know where you can go and audition them for free. Like you have all these resources available, and in Utah, I just had no idea how to find anybody. The hardest character to cast besides Detective Donner was, of course, Kris Connors. And it was for me, I felt like Kris was a really complex character. I'd always seen him very Joker-like from Batman. He was very Joker-esque to me, just really psychotic, kind of off his rocker, and not necessarily so sinister, but truly psychotic. Like really just having a disassociative, you know, he has this whole thing where Hollywoods is his mom and he's gonna fix the past, you know, where his dad murdered his mother, he's gonna fix it so that it's not so, he's still gonna murder her, but he's gonna make it nicer. and then it's going to make it not so traumatic for him. That's his ultimate goal with Hollywood. So he's put her in the place of his mother, which is apparent during the film. But it was just it was a really hard character to play, and I thought to myself, gosh, I would not want to be the actress who they're like, can you play this role? I'd be like, ooh. But I had my DP, again, Eric Pasternak. He says, you know, we just worked with this actor. You should audition him. He would be really good for this lead. And I said, okay. So I reached out to this actor, and it was Mitch. And I just said, you know, hey, can you submit an audition? And he was like, sure, I'll submit an audition. And I kind of had to bug him a couple times. I was like, are you interested? Do you want to do this? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to get it to you. And anyway, he sent me his audition, and it was just like clear as day that he was the right person for this role. And I have to say, Mitch hit it out of the park. I mean, he just nailed this character.
Kris,
It's all your fault! You were bad. Dad told me. He had to put you on the naughty list.
Honestly, without an actor to play this character, the film would have been a complete failure. So, super grateful that I was able to find Mitch.
Hi, my name is Mitch Shira. I played the role of Chris Connors in Sleigh Ride. I first heard I was referred to audition, actually. It was from a film buddy of mine. We were filming actually another independent film, and he came up to me and he said, hey, would you be interested in auditioning to play a psycho killer? And I was like, what the hell? Yeah, let's do it. Psycho killer. And auditioned, and very, very gratefully and surprisingly got it. I was super excited to play this role. The minute I started working with Olivia and doing background character work, figuring out my motives, getting much more of a deeper idea of Kris, who he is, I was stoked. And working with Olivia was amazing. Let me just tell you. She gave me free reign, not all the free reign, but basically to ad-lib, to improvise, to have fun. And it was such a creative and inclusive production. Most of the things I was able to do as Kris, playing Kris, I would not have been able to do under another director. And to this day, I tell people about Sleigh Ride, how it was such a pivotal experience for me working on that show. And the collaboration that Olivia, as the director and the actor, was able to create, just solidified for me that art in all its forms, whether it's acting, film, writing, music, whatever it is, in all of its forms, it at its base, one of its pillars, I believe, is collaboration, creative collaboration, working together. And Olivia did a beautiful, beautiful job at keeping that atmosphere throughout the entire show. I absolutely loved playing Kris. It was such a blast. It was so much fun. Not only did she create an atmosphere of collaboration, she created an atmosphere of creative fun where I was just able to play. I was able to play with those, my fellow actors, play with those other characters, and have fun. And ironically, in a horror movie, like the whole time I remember we would do a scene and I would turn to Olivia and be like, was that too goofy? Like, I don't, is this too goofy for a Psycho Santa killer? And she would continually comfort me with her direction and say, no, that was, actually it makes it kind of creepy, how goofy and sing-songy you get. And it was that for the entire show. Every day was a treat going to film. I would get so excited, as well as it was my first full-length motion picture, and not only that, having a much more prominent role in a motion picture. I'm used to a lot of smaller side roles, and aside from the nerves, I remember the very first day I got to the film set, and I was pretty nervous. I was like, I have all these choices that I had made, and I was ready to go, but it was the first time really that I had had such, well, even a psychotic killer role. I don't know if I'll ever have a role like that again. But even just that role, it was so new for me. And I remember the first couple of takes, I was in my head. I was trying to figure out, I was just really in on myself, just trying to figure out if the choices I had made were right, if I was supporting the show. I was looking to Olivia for direction, and she would give it to me. And within the first couple of takes, she came up to me, and I remember she just patted my back, put her arm around me, and was like, "You're doing great. Just have fun. Just have fun. You're doing great." And that simple moment I remember how great I felt, how relaxed I felt, where I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm here to play. I'm here to play with these brilliant fellow artists and to create this vision for Olivia. And I loved Chris Connors. I love that character. Creepy character, but it was an absolute pleasure. And that's even an understatement. I look to the filming of Sleigh Ride, that whole production, filming it, putting it together. That is and will be, to this day and throughout the rest of my acting career, one of the most pivotal experiences that I draw from. And I hope people see it. I hope people can sense the creativity and go along that journey, pick up on Olivia's vision, and just have one hell of a sleigh ride. No pun intended. It was only inspiration when I was playing Chris. Now it was only inspiration when I was playing Chris. Now without the direction of Olivia, I'm just dry. All my jokes are just dumb. I'm just gonna stop.
The other character that was very hard to cast was Detective Donner.
What is your name, Detective?
It's Donner. Right, you want to know so you know who to file a complaint against?
I was trying to get a name actor for this role. It was supposed to be a really small role. It was supposed to be able to shoot in 2 days, and that was going to keep my costs down, but it ended up being 3 days, and then your costs aren't down at that point. You know, someone has to come and they have to be there for 3 days. And I offered the part to Kevin Sorbo and went back and forth with his agents, just back and forth via email, and they just were like, we need more money, we need more money, we need more money. And I was just like, I don't have any more money. Like, already I'm offering you more money than I have, you know, because I'm one of those, like, I'll get the money, you know. not the best attitude to have with a script on a budget. But anyway, in the end, I stuck to a certain number and Kevin passed. And then I kind of threw it out to a couple other big names and they passed right away. And I was kind of getting discouraged. Just trying to figure out who the right person was. And anyway, I went to a job for a girlfriend of mine. She had a gig and we're decorating for Christmas. And as I'm pulling in the car, I'm like, ding, I have this light bulb moment. And I'm like, well, Brian Krause, you could ask Brian Krause. And I knew Brian. Knew him? I knew Brian's ex-girlfriend. We had worked together on a project in the past. And I had met Brian one time. And I thought to myself, what the heck? I follow him on Instagram. I'm just going to message him on Instagram. So I went on Instagram and I found him and I was like, hey Brian, how are you? I don't know if you remember me, but I was a good friend of your ex-girlfriends, I'm not gonna say who, and you know, we worked together on this thing, and I'm shooting this film and I'd really love you to come and be a part of it. It's this many days for this much money. Are you interested? And Brian got back to me and he was so friendly, which was so cute because I know for a fact he did not remember who I was. But he was so friendly. He was just like, hey, how are you? It's been so long. You know, I haven't seen her, his ex-girlfriend, in such a long time. And, you know, I don't know who got who in the separation. And I was like, well, I got neither of you. I lost her as a friend. And I mean, we just didn't stay in touch after something that was totally not related. But anyway, he was super nice and responded so professionally. He was like, yeah, why don't you send me a script and we'll see if there's something we can do together. And so I sent him the script and he responded favorably, and he was another godsend, because had I been working with Kevin Sorbo, it would have been a nightmare for me. I'm just too small of a production, right? The snow was astronomical. There would have been nowhere to put a trailer for a star. You know, like, who knows what the requirements would have been for Kevin Sorbo, on top of that he wanted way more money than I could afford. Brian was so easy. Brian was like, you know, why don't you figure out how, you know, what flight, and I'm gonna drive out because I want to go here afterwards, and it will just give me that money. And I put him up in a hotel, and then I think the hotel was like no good. I tried to put him up in a good hotel, but I think the hotel was no good. And I was like, I'm so sorry, Brian, but there was no special treatment. Holding was holding for everybody, and the makeup person was the makeup person for everybody. That's just what it was for the budget that I was working on. And Brian never complained. He was so happy on set. He was so friendly with everybody. He never missed a mark. He always hit his light. He always knew his lines. He took these wonderful pregnant pauses in his scenes. He just was not afraid at all to be in the moment and hang there. And I loved that, both about directing him and about working with him. It was so fun to work with Brian Krause. I would recommend him to everybody. You know, and then it's funny because my sales rep, kind of my mentor, KO Creative, is owned by Kris Kringle Killer, and she is the one who finished my first film, you know, colored and did my trailers and my 30-second spots and my posters. She did all of that work with her finishing house, and then got me distribution for my first film. So after that, I've been a lifetime loyal to her, and so I took all of the second film, all of Sleigh Ride, to her and was like, here, let's finish this film. And so she's done the whole thing, and including getting distribution. And she called me and she said, she says, why isn't Sleigh Ride on IMDb for Brian Krause? And we keep trying to add him and we can't get it to work. And she said, okay, well, why don't you call him and see if there's some reason why, and if not, you know, she says, I'll try adding him, because she says he has a really great IMDb presence, because he's in like the top 5,000, you know, like he's in the top of actors. Anyway, I called Brian. I was like, hey, is there some reason we can't add you on IMDb? And he's like, you can't add me on IMDb? And I was like, no, we can't. We keep trying to, and it won't work. And he's like, here, let me try it. And then he added himself to Sleigh Ride on IMDb. That's how easy Brian is to work with. He was so great. So yeah, that was a gift from heaven, that all the right people said no and the right person said yes.
Listen, Miss Woods, this killer only targets women who are having... So is there something I need to know?
Like what?
Like, are you having an affair?
With the rest of the cast, I went with a casting director. I used Jeff Johnson Casting. He's like the casting director in Utah. If you've done any work there, you've worked with Jeff Johnson. And he was, I called him up and I said, Jeff, I really need help casting this. And I said, and I'm to the wire now, because I've been struggling to find people and I can't make it work, and now it's down to the wire, and I'm like, I need people and I don't even have time to go out and audition them. I'm gonna have to hire them from videos. And he's like, okay, no problem. And he's like, what's your budget? And I told him and he laughed. He was like, oh, I haven't worked on that low of a budget in a long time. And I was like, okay, well, I need your help. And he's like, okay, well, how about we do it for this much? And he's like, I know that's a lot when you're working on that small of a budget. And I was like, if that's all you're gonna ask for, thank heavens. I mean, he was so generous. He took so little money, and then he had his assistant or his partner do it. Robert worked with us and collected the videos and sent us all of the stuff, and we hired the husband, Zach. We hired Mike Gira and Zachary Bird, and got all of our leads through Jeff Johnson. Thank heavens. So that's how we met Mike. I saw his video. It's an interesting story with Mike. I felt as a director that the hardest role to work with was going to be the son, the child actor. And so when I got the auditions, there was a little girl there who was very talented, and I thought, okay, it was originally written for a boy, but I had been open to either one because I wanted to get the best person. And she was so talented, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to use this little girl. She was very dark hair and almost dark skinned, and just a beautiful little thing. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to hire this girl. And I offered her the role, and I offered Mike the role because Mike was dark. Mike was the most talented that matched this girl. Like, I'm trying to put this family together, right? So that it all makes sense in my head, right? Like, it has to all make sense, which is just silly. But anyway, because it could have been anything, right? But anyway, that's how it had to be in my head was, you know, this dark girl, and I needed somebody to justify that because I'm not dark. Anyway, she ended up not being able to do it. And so then we quickly reverted back to Zachary. He was obviously the best of the boys that had been available, and quickly made him an offer, and he was thrilled to do it, and his family was close, and they were so easy to work with. And again, it was just a godsend, like just the perfect thing, because her family had all these problems, and the parents couldn't agree, and they were oh my gosh, so grateful that they just decided to opt out. And then I got Zach because they showed up every day. His mom or his dad was with them. They were delightful. They were happy to be there. They were so workable. They were so okay with the content, because it's hard to put a child into this kind of content, you know? Anyway, they were totally open-minded about it, and just Zach came and just did a great job with the role. Super grateful and so blessed that he ended up being our child actor on set.
How did you get cast in Sleigh Ride?
I nailed my audition. I love being the youngest on set because everybody was so nice to me. I even got to build Legos on set.
What was the best part?
The best part was probably that I got to be in a movie with very good actors.
Who was your favorite person to work with?
I loved working with everybody, but if I had to pick, it was probably Mitch. I'm really excited that it's coming out, and I hope you all will like it.
And then we'd already made the offer to Mike, which I was like, well, now it doesn't make sense. But Jeff was like, it makes perfect sense. He's like, you're blonde and Zach's blonde, and he just takes after you. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so then we had our perfect family figured out. So just so you know, actors, if you're watching this as an actor, which you're probably not, but if you are, there's so much that goes into it that you have no control over. So there you go. So we hired them from videos. We got, again, all the right people. Everything just worked out so great. Just all the blessings from heaven pouring down on this production.
So when my agent sent this notice out for this like small indie horror film that was going to be shooting in Utah, I immediately jumped on it. I've always been a big fan of horror films. It's one of my favorite genres, and I've always wanted to be part of one. And I just, sent a reply back saying I was really interested, and before I knew it, I got an audition. However, they sent me an audition for 2 roles in the film. One was for Barry, and the other is for the killer. And I decided to go with Barry only because I felt like, I don't know if I had the right, I guess, presence for the killer in this case, the Santa Claus. So yeah, I just decided, you know what, Barry seems like a fun role. I can go with that, and did it, sent it in, and I think it wasn't too long before I heard back and found out I'd booked the role. So reading the script, it was very apparent that Barry, he loves his son very much, and he does love his wife, despite the fact that there's these simmering sort of just under the surface marital issues going on. And he's, even though he's not necessarily a man of action, he shows through the film that he's able to kind of rise to the occasion. And not being a father myself, what I had to draw from was really experiences with my own father. Now granted, we never had any experiences like what's in the film, but just in his sort of like playing this, or sort of downplaying this role of, he's not boring, but he's not, there's nothing really extraordinary about him until he finds himself in an extraordinary situation. Anytime you get to do your own stunts is always welcome. I love doing my own stunts, and I had some prior experience with stunt work, having gotten to work on the film Contagion. And so here, where I was much more front and center in terms of the action, and our stunt coordinator, Brian Finn, was tremendous and really taking us through all the steps for making sure everyone was safe on set, and just always providing like valuable feedback in terms of like how it looked on camera, and whether if there's any little changes, we can make it even look better. And so it's, I always love doing stunt work. Well, if I had to choose the worst aspect of making the film, it had nothing to do with the cast or crew. It was really the weather. The weather was always something we had to contend with, especially with like exterior, shooting outside. And I remember in particular one scene where it was, a scene in which me and my son, played by Zachary Bird, who was tremendous in this film, and he was such a champ especially when it came to this scene, because we were shooting. It was night. I think it was like late night. It was snowing. It was almost blizzard conditions.
To look after her.
Dad, don't leave me!
You need to look after your son. Listen, I'll find her, I promise.
It was so cold. We were shooting in winter in Utah, so, and it was a scene involving us talking to like the police, and it was just take after take. We were just freezing, just absolutely freezing. And of course, they made sure that once they yelled cut, they got jackets on us and blankets and whatnot. But I just kept thinking of Zach, because he was a real champ. He was holding his own in that scene, despite how cold it was. But he made it through, and he was fantastic. And I guess the only other scene I can think of that where it was not the funnest of days was probably the last day of shooting, or at least for me. It was when it was not so much snowing but raining, which almost made it worse because the rain is so cold, and so you're just getting drenched, and of course it was an exterior outdoor scene as well. So, but yeah, I would say that was the only issue I ever had on the film, was just contending with the weather. I think the best part about working on this film was just getting to work with that particular cast and crew. Everyone on it knew their jobs and knew them well, and so it was just such a harmonious, kind of family dynamic we all had, and between takes we just like love to joke around with each other, and getting to know one another, because that's the thing, when you're on set for weeks at a time with the same people, there's that family dynamic, that starts to kind of permeate. And so yeah, it was just I think the absolute best aspect was simply working with everyone on this film. Yeah.
For 2 days. So here's what happened. My brother owned the house that we shot in. My brother and his wife and his 3 kids. And I said to him, Robert, I need you guys to move out for 2.5 weeks while we shoot there. I was like, you're not going to want to be there anyway. It's going to be crazy. I don't know if you've ever been on location where you shoot. For some reason, nothing can stay in its original position. Nothing. Not the pictures on the walls, none of the furniture, none of the decorations, nothing stays in the same place. Even if you're planning to use it, for some reason, every single thing gets, and there's all this equipment that they bring in and they just stack it up, and oh my gosh, the house was in shambles, and the only room that looked like a room was the room that we'd shot last and then left it like that at the end of the night. It's just crazy what happens to your locations. So if you're gonna rent your space to film crews, just be aware. They're very respectful. Nobody, my brother was like, no shoes in the house, so everybody took their shoes off, or they brought their indoor shoes for the shoot. But anyway, my brother and his family literally moved out and moved in with their in-laws, his in-laws, for 2.5 weeks. They were down the street, so it was okay, still in the same school district and, in the same neighborhood, so they were close by, which was also fortunate. And then the crew and I moved in. I flew a couple of girlfriends up to help me and to be crew, and it was so fun to have them there. And then one of them got COVID, and that was a nightmare. Oh my gosh. The COVID was a nightmare. But fortunately, it wasn't the nightmare that it could have been, because my crew just totally stepped up and called in friends, and we had people show up, and it was amazing how it all worked out in the end. But yeah, so the house was my brother's, who's also in the film as Officer Kane. So I had 3 of my brothers in the film. Officer Kane, Officer Shepard, and Officer Wiseman are all my brothers. And I have to say, when we were watching them as we were shooting, we were like, ooh, it was really interesting because Brian interacted with them a lot because he was the detective and they were the police force. And the contrast between the perfectionism that was Brian and the amateur effort that was my brothers, I was like, oh my gosh. But I have to say that on screen, it all kind of balanced out. My editor did a good job, and it all kind of balanced out. And I was super grateful, and it was super fun to have my brothers there. And I was very grateful to them because they work for free. So they're free labor. They're like, yeah, put me in your movie. They just love it. So that is super fun for me to have them there. And then it's a huge break for me to have them be free labor, because at the end of the day, after you've paid your cast and crew for a single day of shooting, it's not cheap. It's not cheap. one of the other things that we had happen besides COVID was that it was the heaviest snowfall in Utah for like the last 20 years. All of a sudden the skies opened up and just dumped down snow, and almost every single day. And my brother's house is up on a hill, so it has this big steep, you know, driveway that you drive up, and he would call me in the morning and he'd be like, Olivia, can you go out and shovel the driveway? And I was like, I think so. I mean, I've never shoveled the driveway because I lived at home in Utah and went to college where I was in a dorm, and then I moved to LA. And so I've never shoveled snow. I've never shoveled the driveway. Anyway, he and his kids would just come in the morning. Even though they're living with their in-laws, they would come over to their own house and they would shovel the driveway, because if you don't and someone drives on it, then it packs it down, it all becomes ice, and then the driveway becomes undrivable. Anyway, it was so helpful to have him come and do that. And I did attempt to shovel the driveway on a couple of times, and my husband helped as well with the snowblower. He would get the snowblower out, but oh my gosh, we were like useless for that, as the snow just dumped. And then it's dumping in one location, like you just were at the base of the mountain with my brother's house, and the snow is stacked up above our heads. And then we would go into downtown Ogden, which is 30 minutes away, and it would be no snow. And I'm like, how can there be no snow here? It was I mean, it's muddy and it's wet. It rained on us. The weather was crazy. And when you're doing a low budget film, there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to be like, put some stock footage of there, like it's pouring, it's dumping snow during one scene, and then the clouds clear around the moon, and then suddenly there's no snow. And you're in a whole different location where there's no snow on the ground all of a sudden. And there's nothing you can do about that. We didn't go anywhere far or new. We were still in Ogden, Utah shooting, but there just wasn't any snow. So another one of the difficulties about shooting in Utah was that here in LA, you can hire, there are actors who have their own cop uniforms, their own motorcycles decked out for police. There are police rental cars, like fake police cars parked on the side of the road that are like, rent me for your movie shoot. And so it's so easy to get police officers for your film. Well, that was not the case in Utah. There was no place to rent a fake police officer. I hardly could even rent police uniforms. I actually ended up buying police uniforms from the uniform store where they get their uniforms. That's how I got the police uniforms. I had to go and buy them. And it was just lucky. I worked with Ryan Hadley, who is the chief of police. He's actually retiring soon, but he's the chief of police. And my family had a history with Ryan. My dad knew him growing up. He was a little younger than my dad, and my brother had some run-ins with the law, and Ryan had been, or Officer Hadley, I should say, had been helpful in, you know, working with the police and with my family. And anyway, I said to my dad, can I get Officer Hadley's phone number? And he was like, sure. So my dad gives me Officer Hadley's phone number, and I call him up, and I'm just like, hi, I'm Ralph Dunkley's daughter, and I know you know Ralph Dunkley. You know, my parents are very well known in the community. And anyway, I'm shooting this film, and I need police cars, and I need policemen, and I need a precinct. Can you help me? Can you help me do this? And he did. He had to put himself on the line. He had to just finally say, because he has to go through the mayor and he has to go through the city council, and you know, it's kind of booked as an event where, you know, I had to pay for the police officers' time, so we had to have the police officers with their vehicles. there's real police officers in the film. Anyway, and they finally were just like, we don't know, like a horror film, and is this what we want, and blah blah blah. And Ryan finally just said, look, I'll be responsible for what happens. He's like, I'll take responsibility for this girl and this crazy project, and he's like, I'll do it, and we'll just I'll be responsible. And he just totally stepped up and provided. We had the officers come out to my brother's house and brought their trucks, you know, their vehicles, and you know, we shot those scenes. And we shot in the actual Pleasant View Police Precinct. That's their office. That's their place. And holding was in a courtroom. Like with the official, you know, where the judge would sit, and, you know, we're sitting in the chairs, and that's where holding was, is we're in the courtroom. It's, I mean, just this tiny little building where, you know, everything's in one. I think the mayor's office was just down the hall, but it worked out perfect. And all thanks to Officer Hadley. So thank you, Officer Hadley. Sleigh Ride will be available October 22nd. It will be available via lots of platforms, actually. We are going to be on Apple, Prime, we're going to be on Fandango at Home, Google Play, YouTube, Microsoft, and Vimeo, as well as on cable, if you're interested in watching it on cable, with Comcast, Xfinity, Spectrum, Altus, Cox, Dish, Fios by Verizon, Frontier, Suddenlink, Mediacom, and Armstrong. So if you know what any of those are, we're going to be available on those as well. We also will have pre-orders available. And this is what I would ask of you. If you are even remotely, if you're thinking to yourself, you know, I'll probably give that movie and this crazy girl a chance, and I'll probably watch this movie. And if you're thinking that to yourself, please, please, please pre-order. Please pre-order the movie on iTunes. And here's why. If we sell so many pre-orders, then it will improve our placement in the online store for Apple. Does that make sense? It will move us closer to the top, and maybe even get us in the recommended list. So if you are planning to watch it, if you're not, then of course don't worry about it. But if you are thinking to yourself, you know, I'll give this movie a try, sounds interesting, please, please, please pre-order the film. That will help us greatly by improving our placement with Apple TV. Okay, hope to see you there. Thanks for watching.